Welcome to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio, bringing you insights and strategies to help you create a magnificent and fulfilling second half of life. Here's your host, certified professional retirement coach and best-selling author, Dr. Dorian Mintzer.
I want to welcome everybody to my fourth Tuesday Revolutionize Your Retirement interview with expert series to help you create a fulfilling second half of life. I'm Dorian Mintzer, owner of Revolutionize Retirement and your host and facilitator. Today we're going to be focusing on making healthy eating happen. And my guest today is Sue Levy, who's founder and president of Savory Living. I actually met Sue through a friend of mine who they were walking dogs, and Sue lives right nearby. And I had the honor of being, I think, part of the first pilot that Sue had, and I would go over to her house and learn about nutrition and have cooking lessons, and it was wonderful. And I've recommended people to her programs, and now she's moved ahead and has online programs, which is very exciting. Sue's the founder of Savory Living, which is a nutrition and healthy eating company. She works with clients from all over the world, providing nutrition education, cooking classes, and healthy eating inspiration. With her curriculum running online and in several Fortune 500 companies, Sue's on her way to achieving her goal of 1 million lives made better. And she's very much on the way of that. The other thing that she did do a presentation in person to the Life Planning Network here in New England, and it was really very exceptional too. So I think you're all in for a treat. So let's get going. And Sue, how can any of us tell if we're eating well for ourselves?
Sure. Thanks for having me on your call. I'm excited to be here. And I think that's actually a great question, Dory, right? I like to tell people it's less about healthy eating and more about eating well for you. And there's this myth out there that it's this idea that there's only one right way to eat. And what works for somebody should work for me, and I just have to figure out that one right way and how to make it work in my life. And in reality, it just isn't true. We're all different. We come from different backgrounds. We like different foods. The energy and pace of our lives is different. So what we know is that there is not one static right way to eat for everybody, right? One thing that everybody should be doing and doing it the same way. But what we do know is there's a right way to eat for you as an individual, and you owe it to yourself to figure it out. And ways to tell if you're eating well for you are, let's talk about some of the positive signs, like your energy should be great. You should have balanced, even energy throughout the day, and that means you're not crashing at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. Your mood should be even. You should be able to tolerate stress and not be flying off the handle at things. Your sleep should be good. And your digestion should be good. So if you're experiencing anything like gas, bloating, heartburn, constipation, or chronic diarrhea, that's a sign that how you're eating needs to be adjusted, because you should feel calm in your belly and feel good. And also things like immunity. Are you getting sick a lot? And if you are and can't seem to shake these things, that's another sign that you want to tweak how you're eating. Weight's a good indicator. If you're at a healthy weight that you feel good about, if you're not carrying that extra weight in your belly region, and I'm going to talk a bit about that in today's discussion, but if you're carrying extra weight in your belly region, that means how you're eating isn't right. And it's a sign that you've got probably inflammation in your system. And we all know that inflammation is the precursor to most of the major diseases that we either want to slow down or avoid. And those are diseases like if you have high blood pressure, cholesterol, high triglycerides, diabetes, cancer, or even if you're living with the signs of inflammation, anything that has an itis at the end of it, like arthritis, diverticulitis, that tells you that's an indication of inflammation, and you want to look at how you're eating. So if you've got headaches or migraines, fibromyalgia, lupus, like they believe now that a lot of autoimmune conditions are also linked to inflammation and how you're eating and how you're feeling. And what's clear is if you get your eating working well for you, you can feel better now, but also go a long way towards slowing down or preventing most of the major diseases of our time. I believe healthy eating and eating well for you is probably the most important thing that you can figure out to improve your quality of life and your overall health.
I can really hear your passion in it, and I have to say that Sue has, and you really have helped me a lot. As I said at the beginning, I had the honor of being part of your pilot program, and it's really helped me and my energy and immune system and all of that too. So I can say that Sue knows what she's talking about. Can you tell us how you developed Savory Living and what led you to get all involved in this? Because I know you were doing other things before Savory Living.
Oh, yeah, sure. This is great. Yeah, I'd love to tell you about my story and my path to Savory Living, and I want to take you back to when I was 34 years old. If you had said to me, Sue, are you healthy? Are you eating well? Is your health well? I would have said, I think so. Despite some things to the contrary, and by things I mean I was probably about 20 pounds heavier and I was carrying it in my belly region, and I had all these digestive problems. So I was diagnosed as having GERD, acid reflux, I had heartburn, I had IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and I was also diagnosed as having delayed gastric emptying, which meant that they call that gastroparesis, which is when things are so inflamed in your digestive tract that it slows down. And it took me about 4 times the amount of time it would take a regular person to move food through their system, and it was creating all sorts of problems and pain. And so my doctor had me on high-dose acid blockers, and he also had me on a pill that he had to order from Canada because it wasn't approved here, that I would take 20 minutes before I ate anything to move food through my system. And it's crazy to look back now at that because I thought that was just normal, and I kept motoring ahead. And I remember even saying to my gastroenterologist, there has to be a dietary connection to this. And I remember he said, you know what, if I knew what to tell you how to manage it through diet, I'd write a book and make a lot of money. And I said, okay. And he said, just take the pill, Sue. You'll be fine. You got a lot going on. And at the time, I was a partner running an ad agency working in rare diseases and in the science space. And I just didn't have time to figure things out, and so I kept taking the pills and kept chugging along. And then I got a really scary diagnosis that I live with today. So I live with an ultra-rare lung disease. It's called LAM for short, and basically it's an estrogen-receptive cancer. As a result of estrogen, the tissue in my lungs grows these cysts, and these cysts over time take over my lung and they destroy the integrity of it. It's a really rare disease. Only 2,500 women have ever been diagnosed with it. And as a result of this disease and the progression, you end up with a lot of collapsed lungs. And most women, when I got my diagnosis, they said it's not good news because most women with your disease are going to need lung transplants in 10 years after they've been diagnosed. And the first question I had was like, what goes on with a lung transplant? And when you look at those numbers, it's also equally pretty scary because something like only half of the women are still alive 10 years after a lung transplant. So to be 35 and to think, wow, I might have 20 years is a scary thing. So, of course, what I said next to my doctor was, you've told me about the really scary side of this. There have to be some mild cases. Why don't you tell me about those women? And they said there are some women, there's very few, but they live into their 90s and they have a slow progression. And I said, great, that's my lane. Get me there. How do I get there? And they said, you know what? We don't know. We're sorry. There's just so much we don't know. And maybe dietarily avoid estrogen, avoid soy because that's estrogen containing, and maybe go vegan, then avoid animal proteins because of the hormones. And for me, being the kind of person that I am, that just wasn't a good enough answer. So I thought, you know what, I've got to figure out how to slow this disease down, and I've got to figure out how to do it in a way that isn't so crazy. And I'm going to go back to school at night and I'm going to study nutrition, and I'm going to learn how food works inside the body, and I'm going to learn what I should eat more of instead of just what I shouldn't eat, because that's a jail sentence of a way to live. And so when I went back to school, I used myself as a guinea pig. I just kept applying what the experts were saying about eating to support your health, experts from the scientific and medical community. So I would eat more of some things, and I would reduce other things that were higher in sugar, that caused inflammation. And I also identified the foods that I just didn't digest well, and I took them out. And the most amazing transformation happened. I lost the 20 pounds. All my digestive symptoms have cleared up. And to date, I'm not on a single digestive medication, and I was on a lot. And then the piece that I'm most excited about, and you can't see me knocking on wood here on my desk, is that my lungs have been holding firm and strong, and it's been 10 years with no decline since my diagnosis. I really believe in this stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most important things you can do, and one of the most amazing benefits of all this was that I just feel better eating better, and my quality of life improved. And so for me, another big part of the equation of living with this kind of a disease and hearing about it in your 30s is this concept of legacy. I always thought I had so much time, and suddenly it was like, wow, you know what? I'm not guaranteed that time. And by the way, no one's guaranteed the time. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, right? But it got me to think about my legacy and what am I leaving behind. And that was really the creation of Savory Living, which is I want to make a million lives better. I want to teach people what I wish someone had told me 15 years ago. And I think if they had, I would have had a much different path. And what I want to leave behind is helping to connect more people with how to eat well for them so that they can feel better and they can realize their potential and enjoy life to its fullest. And that's really what Savory Living is all about. It's giving people the information, the tools, and the skills that they need, getting them to really shift how they eat to work better for them.
And you're really a role model from your own story. It's so wonderful. And thinking about legacy, I think many people on the call are at that point in life, too, of thinking about how do we want to give back? How do we want to be remembered? And I think it's just so wonderful that you not only helped yourself, but you've created this program that's so helpful for other people. And I know you specialize a lot in this behavior change, and there really are great results with your program. Yours an example. I feel like I'm an example. Other people I know are examples. Can you share a little about what the ingredients are that you think are really important or essential to changing how we eat?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they kind of the cornerstone of our program. And we spent about 4.5 years piloting and getting the magic mix of things right. Because when you think about it, deciding how you eat is something you form as a habit in early childhood. And it's also a very big personalized issue, and it's an issue of control. And so you can't tell someone to eat differently. You have to get them to connect some dots and understand some things and experience the benefits of eating better to want to turn it into a lifestyle and not one of those rigid, weird, healthy eating diets that fail. And so what we've found is that there's really 3, pardon the pun, ingredients that are involved. And the first thing is you have to appeal to people's brains. And so you have to understand how food works inside the body. We've got to boost your nutrition IQ so that you can say, oh my gosh, I get it. I see where I might be off balance now. I see what's going on, and I see how I can change it. And that creates the desire to eat differently and to change things up. But the second part of it is if you just stop there, it's like an intellectual endeavor where you read a book on something, watched a PBS special or a documentary, but you didn't really take action. And that's where number 2 comes in, which is new skill development. Getting somebody the food ideas to shift how they eat, the cooking skills, the flavoring skills, or even the idea of how do you eat differently when you're ordering from a restaurant menu, from a friend's buffet table, prepared food sections of a grocery store. That's the skill piece of it, which is number 2. And number 3, which is so important, is you have to feel a difference week 1. If you're going to spend that time thinking about how you're eating, making some small shifts to what you're doing, you better notice a difference. And that's this idea of people feel great and they want to continue. And it's amazing. We just did a pilot with a Fortune 15 where we measured outcomes data. And we had, when we ask questions like, how likely are you to recommend this program to friends and family, we get in the 90s. When we ask people, is this sustainable life change, we get in the 90s. And then we ask this question about, did this program help you feel better and experience better health? And 95% of the people said yes. So what's happening is Savory Living isn't about a particular diet. It's about connecting people, and it's a catalyst, really, to connect people with the honest information from the scientific and medical community, but to get them the food ideas so that they can eat in a way that works better for them and not blow up their whole life to make it happen.
That's amazing, and it's true. But let's just have you keep going. I think you're on a roll right now, so keep going.
Okay, I love this topic. It's like great. And I based on the number of people on this call, I'm getting closer to my 1 million number, so thank you all for indulging me in attending. Yeah, I'm going to take you through today some tips and ideas to help you make healthy eating happen. And I'm hoping you leave with actionable things that you can do, and I'm excited to share it with you. And what I always say when I talk to anybody is, and you can do this, most people know what they should be doing to improve their overall health and how they feel. If I said to you, what are 3 things that would improve how you felt in your overall health, most people list these 3, which is I got to move more and exercise, I should eat better, and I got to manage sleep and get some sleep and manage my stress. And these 3 are really the cornerstone, and they become the stool, a 3-legged stool that's really your health. And if you're thinking about any kind of wellness plan for yourself, you really need to think about these 3. But what's interesting is the one that I play in is number 2, obviously, right? And there's so much press and activation on people's part in exercise, right? All sorts of things out there now in terms of sleep and stress. But the eating better one is really hard to crack. And when you look at some of the data out there, it's probably one of the most important things that you need to get right and you need to make happen. And this is from the Harvard Medical School, and this is a quote from them which I think is really great, and it tells you how much agency you have if you just shift your diet. And they say, forget your old ideas about healthy eating. Research done since the 90s shows beyond all doubt that you can lower your risk for the most serious diseases of our time by following a healthy diet. So that's awesome. But here's the problem. What the heck is a healthy diet? Right? For so many people, it just is so confusing. It's contradictory. They tell you fat is good, fat is bad, eggs were bad, but now they're good. What about chocolate? I don't know. I have a friend that did this. She achieved that. What about this friend that couldn't do this and didn't get to there? It's this kind of crazy maelstrom that you try to sort your way through. And when I say to people, what gets in the way of you making healthy eating happen, these are most of the barriers that we see for people that come into our program. They say, you know what, I don't have the time. This can't be a third job. I'm confused about all the contradictory science and studies and information out there, and I just shut down. I say, I'll handle this when I have more time to dig in, and you know what? I don't. This third one is ease, right? This is Dunkin' Donuts' tagline, America runs on Dunkin'. I think it's a real apt tagline, and it's true. We run on Dunkin' Donuts, and it shows, right? But you also can't deny the reality of that, which is people are on the go, and so you have to be able to eat well in the real world, and that means outsourcing the food that you get, and you can do that if you just understand some things. The other barriers that get in the way is honestly the baggage that everybody carries with them about healthy eating, and you'll probably recognize yourself in some of these. And it comes from people having tried diets and things and real rigid approaches, and it makes them think, oh, God, I don't want to do this now. I'll start next week. And the first one is this idea that food is all good or food is all bad, and you can never have the bad and only eat the good, which means if you're going to do healthy eating, you're going to rip all your favorite foods out of your day and be miserable. It's just not true. Or it's, have at it, it's healthy. I know it tastes like cardboard. And that is, like I say to people, you wouldn't eat your pasta plain and overcooked, so why in the world are you eating your vegetables that way? The third one is all about people walking around, I call it hangry, hungry and angry. These old myths about if I could just control my portion size, I would be fine. That is true on some degree, but also there's so much more thinking that it's beyond just calories and that you actually can get to your weight goals and feel full and feel satisfied and not be hangry. You just need to understand some things. And then there's this sort of deprived sense of how people feel when they're trying to make healthy eating happen in a rigid way, and that's just not sustainable. And this middle one is one of my favorites, which is how much salad can a person eat, with that goat picture. And that's if you relegate your healthy eating to salads, you're going to burn out. I don't care how great your dressings are, especially if you live in colder climates in the winter. And the final one I think is the most pernicious of all, and that's this idea that you have to do it perfectly. And if you don't do it perfectly, don't do it at all. And so many people have been in that where I was following, and I said, oh my God, I'm hungry, I want something else, I'm going to eat it, and then you eat it, and you say, oh my God, I'm off of this diet, I can't get back on, and then you binge, and then you're in a bad place. The reality is you don't have to cook, you don't have to grow, cook, and manage every single thing that enters your mouth for you to be healthy. You just have to make some small shifts that will have big impacts, and you can do it in a sustainable lifestyle approach. And this is what I talked about at the beginning with Dory's question. There isn't a right way to eat, but one size doesn't fit everybody, but what we do know is there's a right way to eat, and you owe it to yourself to figure it out. It turns out eating is a habit that we inherit. People used to think there was an obesity gene, but there really isn't. You'd say, I'm big because I come from a line of big people, and it's my makeup. But what they're realizing is, no, you're inheriting something, but it's not an obesity gene. You're inheriting a habit around how you eat. And if we want to change that, which we most certainly do, we've got to look at and help you understand different ideas for what to eat for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, and for snacks. Because if you don't break those habits and get into the weeds on how you're eating, you're going to revert back to how you grew up eating or what kind of is your go-to, which may not be in your best interest. So it turns out eating well is a skill you need to learn. I always say to people, would you let the children in this country grow up not learning how to read or how to do math? When you laugh at me and say, of course not, that's insane. The same thing is true with eating. We need to teach it. You need to learn it. It's like math. You learn one thing and then you build on it. We don't ask kids to jump in and do calculus. It's exactly the same with eating well. You learn some things. You practice. You try. It's like driving a car. You do your three-point turns. You learn how to parallel park. The same is true with eating. And that's where we come in. At Savory Living, I'm passionate about, and we connect people with how to eat well and feel better. And I talked about my personal goal, which is really the goal of the company now, to make 1 million lives better by teaching people a practical way to eat well. What I'm going to share with you today are some tips that we teach throughout the program, but that you can take with you now so you get a flavor of things, but you also have some new ways to kickstart a healthy eating habit. Our curriculum has been taught at leading companies and institutions, and you can see the companies here, a bunch of them. What I love about it is we've got scientists at Novartis who love the program and are learning and changing how they eat, and then we've got movers from Gentle Giant Moving Company doing the same thing. So the idea is that if you appeal to people's brains and you make it very consumer-friendly and engaging and interesting and you give them tangible things they can do, the barriers start to disappear. I'm just going to share a couple testimonials, but this was pretty exciting for us. It was a personal high point for me. We ran our program at Gentle Giant Moving Company, and Larry O'Toole is the CEO and founder of Gentle Giant. And this year, they won the Boston Business Journal's Healthiest Employer Award for the midsize company. And in his acceptance speech, this is what Larry said, and he credited our program with why they were there today. And he said, this program changed our employees' lives all across the country. The Giants are enjoying getting fit and feeling healthier. It's a large part of why we won the Healthiest Employer Award. Write this down. Savory Living, you need to run this program at your company. So that was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So now I'm going to talk about you and what you can do to make healthy eating happen. So in today's discussion, I'm going to help you understand and answer the question of, does what we eat really matter? I'm going to help demystify what healthy eating actually is. And I'm going to give you a sensible, enjoyable, and practical way to make it happen without blowing up your life. I'm going to give you some easy actions you can leave this session with to make it happen. And then Dory asked me to provide some more information on our program just so you could see what it was and get a sense of how people are actively turning healthy eating into a delicious lifestyle. Let's start. We all know what it feels like to feel great. That's you in balance, right? Your energy's good, your mood's good, your relationships are good, your genes feel good. But we also know what it feels like to be off balance. And these are just some signs, and I'm going to call them out because remember, if you want to figure out how to eat well for you, if you've got any of these signs, you need to pay attention. The first one is digestive symptoms of any kind. The second is walking around hungry, feeling like I'm eating, but I'm never satisfied. I can't keep my portions into control. The next one is I'm crashing at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I need another cup of coffee. I don't have even balanced energy throughout the day. The next is maybe you've got tension headaches, migraines, or you're flying off the handle stress-wise. Another one is belly fat. I'm going to talk to you a lot about that and a measurement that you can use to figure out if you're carrying extra belly fat, because that is the precursor to disease, they believe. Where you carry your fat matters. And the next sign that you're off balance is if you've got any chronic health condition that you're living with and any disease that you're living with, it's a sign that you got to look at how you're eating. So as a country, this is just to show the twin epidemics that we're facing. We've got obesity and we've got diabetes. And the predictions for numbers that will come in for this year are that they believe 3/4 of all adults are overweight, and almost a third of all children and adolescents are overweight, and that 15% of adults will have type 2 diabetes. So the thing about type 2 diabetes that's so scary is that it takes its toll on your organs and your system, and you end up dying about 15 years earlier than people that don't have type 2 diabetes. And the reason why is heart disease. So I'm going to give you another statistic. They now believe that for every child born after the year 2000, 1 in 3, so 30%, will develop type 2 diabetes. So it used to be, and this is not socioeconomic, this is not where you live, this is across all demographic groups, some more than others, but it is in affluent communities, well-educated communities, and it's because of how we're eating, which is something that is totally preventable and manageable. And the scary thing with children is if you look at it, it used to be someone got type 2 diabetes in their 50s, heart disease in their 60s, 70s, right? Now they're thinking if kids have type 2 diabetes, they're going to have heart disease in their 20s. This extra fat, and in particular when you carry it in your belly region, is linked to most of the major diseases of our time. So that extra weight is an important thing to pay attention to. And this is where you carry it matters. This is that rubber tire in your center. That belly fat is hurting you. It's been connected to inflammation and disease. And this was on the cover of Time. It first appeared in the year 2000. But inflammation, they believe, is the precursor because it's destroying healthy blood vessels and tissues and gets you to things like heart attacks, diabetes, neurological diseases. They even think dementia, Alzheimer's are connected. Cancers, autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, and then screaming pain like fibromyalgia, migraines, chronic pain, and arthritis. So what you want to do is you want to identify your risk. BMI is no longer the best measurement to use. Get a tape measure, measure your waist at its thickest point. Don't suck in. Use a soft measure. It's much more comfortable. But for men, if you're 40 inches or higher, and women, if you're 35 inches or higher, from a medical health standpoint, you need to lose that belly fat. And just a final slide on this is from the director of the Division of Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity at the CDC, and he says this may be the first generation of children that has a lower lifespan than their parents, which is alarming. Let's talk about moving on to the hope and what you can do. And the reality is that eating to support your health, there's general consensus around it. When you look at what the American Heart Association, the Diabetes Association, the Cancer Society, so the disease groups that you really should care about, and then you look at the diets that perform the best from a health outcome standpoint and from a compliance standpoint, so people enjoy staying on them and eating and living that way, like the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. You look at what the Harvard School of Public Health is recommending, even the government's updated food guidelines, you end up in this place where they align on a consistent foundation, which is awesome because it means you get your foundation right. You go a long way towards preventing or slowing down most of the major diseases of our time, and those are the ones that appear on the right side of this page, and the quality of life things that really help people feel better. So let's go through some tips because I want to share that and get you closer to that foundation. So here's tip 1, and there's also a handout that I provided that you can print out, and it's got these tips on it too. You got to eat more real food, less packaged, processed, highly packaged, processed foods. So this is from Michael Pollan, who's a personal hero of mine, and he says it beautifully when he says, look, I tried to look into nutrition, and I thought it was going to be so complicated, and what I found out was it was remarkably, shockingly simple. And here's his quote, eat real food, not too much of it, more plants than meat. And then he says it really when he says, get off the modern Western diet with its abundance of processed foods, refined grains and sugars, and its sore lack of vegetables, whole grains, and fruit. So there's an opportunity cost. When you are eating packaged, highly kind of junk stuff, you're taking in empty calories. You're not pulling in the nutrients that you need to live well, and you're pulling in a lot of sugar, a lot of salt, and a lot of fat. And he has this other great quote, which I love, which is, if your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize it as food, don't eat it. All right, the second tip. I'm showing on my screen, and I would encourage people to really print out the handout so you can have this if you're listening in via the phone, because this is awesome. This is from the Harvard School of Public Health, and this is their healthy eating plate. And it's Dr. Walter Willett and a bunch of real bright people over there that said, let's look at how people eat, and let's look at the diseases they get. And let's use that long-term data with big sample sizes to give people direction on how to eat. The way I want you to look at this is, and this is for folks that can't see a plate, right? I don't want you to think every time you sit down to eat, you have to fill every section of the plate. You'll go crazy. Instead, I want you to practice what I like to call proportion control, which is, even in the world of healthy eating, you're supposed to eat more of some things and less of other things. But what you want to do is eat to match these proportions. Half of what you eat a day should be vegetables and fruit paired with healthy proteins. Grains should be no more than, and they should be whole, but no more than a quarter of what you eat a day. And to make it tangible, that's probably around no more than 2 servings a day. And a serving is a slice of bread, half a cup of cooked pasta, oatmeal, cereal, rice, 1 slice of whole grain bread, half a bagel. So you start to see most of us are off in that we're not eating enough vegetables and fruit, and we're eating too many grains. The other aspect that they talk about, and I can't go into all of this because of the time, is when they talk about drinks, they say have a lot of water, limit that juice, don't have a lot of it, and I'll show you some reasons why around that. But then when they talk about dairy, they say limit milk and dairy. They don't say have 1 to 2 servings. They say have no more than 1 to 2 servings, and that's because of the links to cancer with dairy. These things that we always thought, oh, just eat the grains, have tons of dairy, and if you're not careful, that can be your whole day because you believe these are healthy foods. And so you can have them, just have them in the right proportion. Tip 3, adopt a simple approach, okay? Resist the urge to go crazy, rip all your favorite things out of your life, and turn healthy eating into a diet. If you try to make it a diet, I promise you, you will fail because diets don't work. They're not sustainable. Instead, I want you to say to yourself, this is a lifestyle and not a diet. This is me deciding how I'll eat. I can eat everything, but I choose to eat more of some foods and less of others. Life includes indulgences, and it is not about perfection. Perfection so often is the enemy of progress with people, and it will get in your way. So I want you to think about food differently, okay? I don't want you to think about it as, oh, it's just a calorie, doesn't matter what that calorie source comes from. It's gas in my tank. It's contributing to my waistline. Instead, I want you to think about it like food is a building block that you are being created out of. The image on this screen it's a building site building a house, okay? And you can see it in progress. And I want you to think about that. The food you eat is becoming you literally. Every 7 years, the cells in your body are turning over, thankfully not at the same time, but you are being built by what you're eating. Okay, so think about it. When you look at that grocery cart at checkout or those bags that you're unloading into your refrigerator, that is becoming you. What do you want your body built out of? I would say probably the same thing you want your house built out of, great material. And you wouldn't choose a shoddy contractor, so what are you doing? Get yourself up to speed and build something great for yourself. What you are doing on a molecular level, this is a picture of the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of energy inside every cell. And I'm a science geek and I love this stuff. But what you are basically doing is you are eating to feed these guys so that your cells will have the energy they need to do the function that they're designed to do. And mitochondria thrive and need nutrient-rich foods to do well. And so that's why, what are you eating more of? You're eating more nutrient-rich foods, and that comes in real, whole, natural foods. You can see on the screen, eat the rainbow. There's so much they don't know, and I don't mean Skittles. Fruits, vegetables. Get those dark leafy greens in, those beans and lentils, seeds and nuts, avocados, olives, those healthy fats. Drink water. People will always ask me this question, how do I know how much and what should I have? And I say to them, it gets graphic, but you got to decide for you. So when you go to the bathroom, look at the color of your pee. If it is Sauvignon Blanc color, you're in good shape. It should be really light yellow. If it's a Chardonnay, you got to drink more water. What should you be eating less of? Grains. Let's talk about it, right? Harvard said have no more than 1 to 2, keep it in that quarter. What's going on with that? So yes, grains have, and the whole grain versions contain nutrients that you need, right? But they're also higher in sugar, and this just charts for you all the carbohydrates. So a lot of people, when they say carbohydrate, they just think grain, but basically anything grown in the earth, and including dairy, is a carbohydrate or has carbohydrates in it. So the glycemic load is an indicator of when you eat a carbohydrate, it gets converted to sugar in your system, and then your body produces insulin to shuttle that sugar to your bloodstream to use the sugar for energy for your cells and to feed those mitochondria. And so what you want to do is you want to keep insulin levels low and stable in your body. And so the way you do that is by keeping your sugar intake low and stable. So it's important to look at foods and how much sugar they release, because you don't want your body having to produce a lot of insulin all the time. So that's what glycemic load measures. It measures your body's insulin response when you eat a certain food. It's different than glycemic index, which is about speed of conversion to sugar. I think load is a better measure, and that's the one I teach in my program. But just to show you, you want to eat more low glycemic load foods, and that's 0 to 10. Anything mid to high, you don't want to have a lot of in the course of your day, because it's going to get your body to have to produce more insulin because of the sugar. Fruits and vegetables, beans, nuts and seeds, dairy, they're low. When you look at grains, most grains are mid to high. And I also want to say there's some exceptions with fruits and vegetables. Some are mid to high, and I'm not going to get into that now, but in my program, we get into all of it. So let's compare. If I said to you from a sugar standpoint, would you drink a can of regular Coke? You'd probably say, no, it's got a lot of sugar. The glycemic load of a can of Coke is 16. That puts it in the mid-range. Let's look at some of our whole grains. That whole grain bagel is 20. That bran muffin, 15. Corn muffin, 30. Those crackers, 14. Half a cup of brown rice, 26. Half a cup of quinoa, 18. Oatmeal, 13 to 17. Each slice of whole grain bread is 10. So you have a sandwich, you're at 20. Those power bars, those grain-based kind of energy bars can be anywhere from 18 to 25. And if you've got kids or grandkids, any slice of pizza is 22, and mac and cheese is 32. Okay, so let me just be clear, right? I am not saying that a slice of pizza or a can of Coke has the same nutritional value as some of these whole grain products. I'm not comparing that, right? But what I'm telling you is, from a sugar standpoint, if you have signs that there's inflammation in your system or you're carrying extra belly fat, you want to get your sugar into better alignment. You got to do what these guys are saying, which is keep your grains contained. So that's what you eat less of. You eat less grains. You make them whole so they count and they're pulling in all the nutrients, and you keep them to 1 or 2 servings a day. So you can have them, just decide where. You're going out for pizza at night? Great. Don't have a grain at breakfast. Go for eggs instead, right? And make sure you have a salad at lunch. Eat less dairy. They say have no more than 1 to 2 servings of dairy a day, and that's because of links to cancer. So what you want to do is think about a serving as a cup of milk or yogurt, 1 slice of cheese. Keep yourself in check. Eat less sugar. Let's talk about sugar. The problem isn't that we're eating sugar, it's that we're eating too much. The average American is taking in 3 times the amount of sugar we were ever designed to handle, and that sugar is hurting us. It's linked to things like poor school performance, weight gain, obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, increased triglycerides, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, dementia, which they believe now is like a type 3 diabetes, poor absorption of calcium and magnesium and osteoporosis, depression, headaches, migraines, early aging, energy issues. So how do you manage your sugar? This is tip 4. I want to show you how to manage sugar intake. I'm going to give you one strategy. There's multiple strategies, but I'm just going to share one. Anytime you eat something that has a packaged food that has a label, I want you to think about limiting the amount of grams of sugar you are pulling in with your packaged food. So for women, you can have 24 grams, and for men, 36. Remember those numbers. You want to add it up and stick to your limit. So turn the package to the side, look at the nutritional panel. It'll tell you what the serving size is, so don't get skunked by something being 2 servings. Look at the sugar, and it'll tell you in grams how much is there. So what do? You use that when you're shopping to buy versions that have less sugar. Instead of that Lara bar that has 24 grams, buy a Kind bar. You can find Kind bars with 5 grams of sugar. Buying breakfast cereal, so instead of that Raisin Bran from Total that has 17 grams, go for regular Total instead that only has 5. Similarly, not a huge fan of flavored yogurts. Those smoothies, this is a Stonyfield Farm organic strawberry smoothie. One serving is 38 grams of sugar. Go for their Greek yogurt instead and add your own fruit. That's just 6. Lose the juice. The juice, 6 ounces of orange juice can have 22 grams of sugar. And the glycemic load, because I'm going to show you how it compares to an orange, is 13. Look at that orange. The glycemic load of that orange is far less. It's just 5 because it's got all that fiber encased in the flesh. Limit dried fruit products like the raisins, twisted fruits, any of those bars or things. The glycemic load of raisins is 28 and a grape is 8. Eat the grape. Freeze them. Develop a taste for water. This just shows you the amount of sugar in a lot of these drinks. Look at Newman's Own lemonade, right? It's organic, it's virgin, it's 27 grams of sugar. A lot. All right, tip 5. I want you to eat 5 times a day. I know this sounds strange to people. If I want to lose weight, I should eat less. But the reality is you want to get your body and your sugar cravings into control. And the way that you do that is by keeping blood sugar levels stable and keeping you full and satisfied. So when I say eat 5 times a day, I mean eat the 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Include 2 power boosts a day. That's what I don't call them snacks. We call them power boosts in my program because it is about you pulling in nutrients. And you'll see what I mean because I'm giving you tangible recommendations for these power boosts. It's an opportunity for you to crowd in nutrient-rich foods. So I want you to think and eat 2 to 1. Remember 2 to 1. Take a plate, divide it in thirds. So it's like you're writing the peace sign on a plate. Fill 2 parts of it with vegetables or fruits and fill 1 part with protein. So anytime you're eating, I want you to think, I got to get the protein in there, and I'm crowding in the fruits and the vegetables. So your job is to assemble and fill that plate. If you are having a power boost, which is a snack, then you think of it like a small dessert plate. If it's a meal, think of it like a regular plate. So you're assembling. When I talk about carbohydrates and that 2 parts of your plate, that's vegetables, fruits. It can be grains too, but remember, don't have more than 1 to 2 servings of grains a day. When I talk about protein sources or things like beans, bean dips, lentils, nuts and seeds and nut butters and almond butter, a peanut butter, dairy, that can be low fat, low sugar. You want no more than 1 to 2 servings of dairy a day. And then everybody's pretty familiar with animal proteins, the chicken, the fish, the egg, the beef, the pork. So let's go through the power boost because that's what I want you to focus on adding in. Make the first one of your day fruit plus protein. That's the 2 to 1. Here's an example, a clementine and pistachios, bananas with walnuts. You can do apples with hummus or an almond butter. You can do grapes and cheese, cottage cheese with fruit. Think and assemble 2 to 1. For the second power boost of your day, I say make it vegetable. So make 1 fruit and make 1 vegetable, because if I didn't say that, most people would just do fruit all day. We're trying to make half of what you eat a day vegetables. So is it hummus with cut up red, yellow, orange pepper? Is it egg salad on thinly sliced or cucumber? Is it mozzarella in between tomatoes? Is it chicken salad rolled up in cucumber on an endive? Is it carrots with almond butter? And there are some of the most amazing hummus flavored spreads that you can buy, like a scallion and beet one that's pretty awesome. They have a roasted eggplant baba ganoush one that's pretty awesome. Let's talk about eating 2 to 1 for lunch and dinner. You have a salad, great. Make sure you got protein on it. That can be beans, that can be chicken, that can be egg. Make sure you're including 2 to 1. For dinner, you go out to a restaurant. Most of the time, you say you order salmon. You're like, I'm being good. I'm doing salmon and not the burger or something. I would say to you, you know what? Get the burger, have half of it, and get a salad and get another vegetable side. But if you're going to do the salmon, which is great too, make sure whenever you're ordering that you realize they're not going to give you enough vegetables to fill half your plate. So order more vegetables and take half the fish home. Here's a trap that you will fall into and people fall into, which is you say you want to eat differently, but then you don't invest in any new skill developments, any new recipes, any new ways to prepare and eat this food. A trap people fall into is boring, healthy food. I said this earlier, you wouldn't eat your pasta plain, so learn how to cook and flavor these vegetables, and that involves moving beyond your typical three. And the way that you learn how to cook and flavor these things, and we teach people this as part of our curriculum, is the cooking technique you use and what you add to it. And then every global cuisine flavor balances. So if you like one type of cuisine over another, you can make anything taste any way that you want. To appeal to the picky eater, what you want to play with is texture, color, and temperature. Do you like it warm? Do you like it cold? Do you like it sliced thin, sliced thick? What colors appeal to you? Is it a green apple versus a red apple flavor-wise? And choose the form you like. Do you like it smooth and blended like a bean dip versus a bean salad? Or do you like your greens as kale chips versus a smoothie? And flavor it to match your preference. This is key. I'll say to somebody, yeah, we convince them they need to eat more beans, and they say, yeah, I don't eat them because I don't like Mexican food. And I say, you know what? That's fair. Don't eat Mexican food then. Life's too short. Don't eat what you don't like. But every global cuisine uses a bean. You like Italian food? Great. It's a white bean. Let's flavor it with garlic, olive oil, lemon, a little crushed pepper. Let's get some veggies in there. We'll get that bean to match how you like to eat. So here are your actions. I want you to include 2 power boosts. Okay, leave this call and say, Sue told me this, I'm going to try for a week to eat the 5 times a day. And so Power Boost 1 is fruit plus protein. Power Boost 2 is vegetable plus protein. Make vegetables half of what you're eating a day. Think of that plate. Assemble your food 2 to 1, so include protein when you're eating, but really aim to crowd vegetables in. Reduce sugar. When you're buying packaged processed foods, read those labels and track to your daily grams. You'll be able to make different choices when you go to the supermarket, and you'll be able to think about your day overall. And keep those grains contained. Pay attention to where you are. You can have 1 to 2 servings. Just mindfully decide where. And my guess is you're having them in places that you probably don't need. It might feel, and I want you to resist the urge to drink from the fire hose. That's always my fear when I give a talk, which is someone, I got to rip and do everything all at once, and it's no. Slow and steady makes it happen. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about my program, and then we'll open it up to questions. And so the behavior change program that Dori mentioned and that I've been mentioning is we help people change how they eat. And in 10 weeks' time, they've got a new habit, and they know how to eat well for them. And these are the elements that I talked about in the beginning, right? To change how you eat, we have to boost your nutrition IQ so you get it. We have to get you new food skills so you're eating differently no matter where you're eating, and you know how to assemble quickly from anywhere, whether that's a restaurant menu, a prepared food section, a friend's home, or you're cooking, you're flavoring, and you're whipping up fast and easy, great foods. And the third part is you have to feel better now and like how you're feeling. Look, if you do what the experts say, you're going to improve your weight, your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your triglycerides. You're going to help with diabetes. You're going to help with heart. We're not teaching a specific way of eating. We're lining you up with what the experts are saying.
I must say, hearing it again has helped me see some areas I need to be more mindful about. And I just think that so much of what you're talking about makes sense. And let me integrate a few of the questions that have come in. And please, anybody, if you have any questions or comments, please submit them so that I can integrate them in here. Barbara from Virginia says, can you share what you know about, a little bit more about anti-inflammatory diet? She said, I hear about the nightshade foods. Is there any science behind this?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. My philosophy, I think there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet that you have to sometimes be careful about, and that's sometimes the danger of the internet. But when I think about anti-inflammatory eating, that's really, you almost have to get your foundation correct, which is that's really what Harvard's healthy eating plate is. Because if you're making vegetables and fruit half of what you're eating a day, you're pairing it with protein, you're including healthy fats when you're eating, that's a big part of anti-inflammatory eating. So that 2 to 1 is really the cornerstone of anti-inflammatory eating, including that protein when you're eating and including healthy fats. Keeping your sugar down is one of the most important things that you will do to reduce inflammation in your system, okay? And one of the things that part of the way that you do that is if you keep your amount of grains down and you keep your sugar down, that goes a long way to reducing inflammation in your system. The other piece that I didn't touch on here, but that's really important, is if you're eating something that you don't digest well, you really want to take that out of your diet, because they believe that these undigested food particles, if you have leaky gut, they're leaving your gut and they're moving into your bloodstream, and they're getting your immune system activated, and that activation creates inflammation in your system. So another aspect of anti-inflammatory eating is identify foods that you're not digesting well. So if you've got any kind of digestive symptoms or anything, that's usually a pretty good indicator that you've got a sensitivity to something and you might want to take it out. There's also a list of 7 foods, a bunch of foods that are problematic for people, but there's also, they believe that grains and dairy and artificial sweeteners, a classification system where they believe that some foods are inflammatory by their very design and kind of nature, and that you want to eat to reduce those. Then you get to the nightshades and the level down. But I feel like for most people, that starts to become, if you haven't gotten the foundation things right, I think that's where you go, because it shifts to align you up with kind of a broader health goal and eating to reduce inflammation. And I don't necessarily feel like you have to go that far into the weeds around nightshades and other pieces.
Great, thank you. Well, let me just keep going with the questions since they're. So Mary from Newburgh says, I've heard as we age we should follow a severe calorie-restricted diet. Is that a good idea? I think you've alluded a little to that.
I feel like as you age, what I would want you to pay attention to more, because they basically believe that as you get older, you consume fewer calories a day anyway. Most people are. And then the worrisome piece that I've heard is you want to make sure you're pulling enough protein in as you get older, because a lot of times people just consume fewer calories, and as you get older, your protein needs don't get less. They actually, for some people, might actually increase. And so you want to make sure you're eating to pull in enough protein, and that's why really pay attention to that 2-to-1 when you're eating. You want to have protein.
I think probably what Mary's referring to, I may be wrong, but what I'm thinking is there have been a lot of these longevity studies where people talk about really severe calorie-restricted diets, and I know there seems to be some controversy about that. So I think my hunch is that might have been behind the question.
Yeah, I am not a huge fan of that. I also don't think that calorie restricted, I don't think that's a sustainable lifestyle approach. I think you're far better off focusing on what you should be crowding in and getting the protein in and eating the healthy stuff. And I think you'll, if you're overweight, I think you want to look at that, but I'm not I also feel like it's very hard in the field of nutrition with studies to prove, you can prove correlation, but you can't prove causality. I think that can make things really difficult because there can be so many other factors contributing to outcomes in a study. And that's why I'm more mainstream in the things that I teach. I believe it should be practical. It should be something that someone enjoys doing, and it should be sustainable, you know?
Right. Yep, and that seems to be such a big part of your program, which is not even thinking about it as a diet, but just something which is just changing your relationship with food so that it works for you.
Exactly. And it's funny, even we have shifts that we move people towards. There's 3 shifts in the program, and one of the shifts is include an indulgence daily. Because the data show that when people include an indulgence in moderation, they do better the rest of their day. And they actually do better with their weight and their goals and their eating. It's one of those, and people, I think, really appreciate that in the program. And then over time, the indulgences start to drop, and they change what they're considering an indulgence. But in the beginning, it really allows people to not feel so deprived and to focus on what you said, which is I'm eating to love myself, really, and get myself what I need.
Yep. So there are some things about the program also, which I'll come to in a minute, but another question is, my husband's a shift worker and works 12-hour shifts and isn't allowed to leave work during his shift. He's been eating lean cuisine-type meals because they're quick, because he only has 1 to 2 hours of free time each day before he has to go back to sleep to go back to work. Any suggestions for meals for this type of situation to eat better?
Yeah, I think it's funny, we've had a bunch of ER doctors and people go through our program too that are in similar, where they have situations where they're I'm eating at weird hours, I can't control all of it, I'm on the run, I can't leave, and I think what I would say is, if we look at what's working for him and you say, can I replicate that with actual real food that doesn't have, that you feel a little bit better about, I think that you can, right? I think what you're saying is he can bring food with him. and it has to be packaged and contained so he can eat it relatively quickly. And so what I would say is you guys got to get yourself a bunch of great containers, and you got to start assembling his snacks and the food you want him to eat more of in such a way that he can just easily open it up and eat it in his shift when he's eating. So I think what he'd be doing is the same thing. It's just you're swapping out lean cuisines for real food. And the way to do that is you got to know what you want to assemble more of, and we talked a bit about that today in the 2-to-1, and you got to get the containers. And you got to have the time in your life to say, I don't know, is it like we teach people weekly food planning skills where you say, here's what my lunches are going to be, my dinners are going to be, my breakfast, all of that, and you turn it into a list, you grocery shop, and you come back home and you assemble.
Mm-hmm. The assembling sounds, taking the time for that, which not everybody has, but I guess it's important to think about what else is more important than taking care of ourselves. So I think that is important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think what I like to say to people is there's a couple of things, and I think it's true. It does take more time, but it doesn't have to be crazy. For example, you're already going to the grocery store to buy the lean cuisines. Why not have a different list of stuff you want to buy, right? And that time is about the same and neutral. It then just becomes getting it home, washing it, cutting it up, cooking it. But that can take some time, but even if there's just a lot of fast techniques that you can learn to cook stuff and prepare stuff and have it ready. But yeah, it does come down to you have to want to eat differently. Otherwise, all things being equal, if you don't have that desire, then yeah, that picking up that thing is a lot easier and faster. But I would say, can you get him to eat a salad that you assemble really quickly that doesn't take if the thing is someone doesn't want to spend the time cooking so that what he's bringing in is cooked food, all right, can you assemble it? Can you buy a cooked chicken from the market that week and assemble some vegetable sides with it? And that gets put into a container for him for that meal.
That's a good thought. Sarah from Atlanta says, thanks for mentioning the glycemic index. I've probably eaten too much whole grains and dairy. I'll check the index numbers from now on. So she just wanted to thank you for that. And Bill from Houston had another question. Any opinions on probiotics or essential enzymes to aid in digestion?
Oh, I know. That's a big one. Yeah, I think, I do a whole thing in the program talking about your digestive health and identifying signs where you're off and healing leaky gut and all of that stuff. I feel for you because the digestive stuff was definitely something that I personally experienced, and there's some foods I have to stay away from. But what I would say from a probiotic standpoint is the thinking is that the bacteria in your gut play a larger role, they think sometimes, in the diseases you will get in your health than your DNA fingerprints. They're at the tip of an enormous iceberg around really understanding what bacteria need to be in your gut, and they think it's highly personalized and highly individualized. What that means is it's very hard to say this is the brand of probiotic that you should buy because the you is entirely different. What I would say is I think they work differently for different people, and I don't know that you have to spend a small fortune on some of them because I think there's no way of knowing if they'll work great for you or for somebody else. And I recommend Culturelle. I've had gastroenterologists recommend it too. The bacteria in it seems good. People do well with it. What you want to be careful of when you choose a probiotic is some of them include dairy and they include gluten. And for example, Align is one that has really good data behind it, but when you look at the ingredients, I believe it has dairy in it. And a lot of people that are trying to get the benefit of a probiotic and have digestive issues, 9 times out of 10, they have a food sensitivity at play too. And so the first thing you want to do is identify what that food sensitivity is and take those foods out. And so the worst thing in the world is if you've got digestive problems, you introduce a probiotic that has some of these sensitive ingredients in it, you can be in real big trouble. So I would just recommend making sure you choose a brand that doesn't have dairy and gluten in it, soy, because soy can be a problem for people too. And then I'm a big fan of Culturelle. I also am a big fan of getting it from vegetables that have been fermented. What you want to do, they believe, if there's so much they don't know, it's you can take a pill, you can also take a quarter of a cup of a fermented vegetable a day. It can be a pretty good source of probiotic too. And that would be, there's a brand called Bubby's Sauerkraut. So when you buy a fermented food, the key is it has to be in the refrigerated section of the store because that means it hasn't been pasteurized. If they pasteurize it and it's shelf stable, so it's in the middle on the shelves in the store, it means all of the live bacteria has been killed. So it needs to be refrigerated. And you'll usually see, if you turn foods over, you'll see live culture usually written on it. So there's a brand I love, low in sugar, called Bubby's Sauerkraut. It's really mild. And I do that sometimes with a little bit of deli mustard. And that's my probiotic.
Mm-hmm.
That I eat during the day.
You turned me on to that too, and I use that. It's very good. So, one last question, and then we'll be pulling it together. But Barbara from Falls Church asks, is fitness part of this program? Weight Watchers tells you to walk 20 minutes a day, for example. So where does fitness fit in with the eating well?
Sure. So fitness, it was you saw it in the stool, the three things I mentioned at the beginning about eating and living to support your health, and exercise plays a very large role in that. It's really interesting, though, because when they look, with the studies that they look at to look at overall health, it's clear exercise has a very large role in that. Recently, I don't know if anyone's been following, but they've got some studies out where they looked at the impact of eating versus exercise on weight. So if you're just talking about weight, and what they have found is that eating has so much more impact on your weight than exercise would and does, which is interesting. A lot of people are up in arms about it and are unhappy about it, but it's interesting to just think about that as a distinction, because as a culture, we're so focused on exercise and we don't really get into, you got to shift how you're eating. That said, my program is about eating to support your health, but exercise is recommended throughout, and I actually give tips and examples for high interval intensity exercise, because they now believe that you may not need to do 20 minutes. If you're doing a high intensity, you can maybe get it done in 7 to 10 minutes. But exercise plays a very large role in your overall health. It also plays a role in your body's insulin response. And if you'll recall, I talked about insulin because I think that's a big part of your health, and eating contributes to it. But the type of exercise you do actually can lower your body's insulin response, so that when you eat sugar, it's having less of an impact on you, which is pretty awesome. Exercise gets discussed in the inflammation class. It gets discussed in several of the other classes throughout the program, and we're providing kind of suggestions and ideas for how people can get exercise into their life, because it's important.
Great. This has been so wonderful, Sue, and I just wonder if there's a last takeaway. You may want to tell people your website, and then any final takeaway. I just want to thank you so much. As I said, I had been part of Sue's program way back at the beginning and realized I've gotten a little off track with a few things, and this was helpful review. And I'm actually thinking about doing the program so that I think since it was a while ago, getting myself back and thinking about it. But I think what's so wonderful is you've given us some takeaway tips just today, so that program or not, people can begin to think about how to have a different relationship and a healthier relationship with food. But so let me turn it back to you for the final takeaway.
Sure. Let me think. I think what I'd say is one of the most important things, hopefully I've convinced you that what you eat matters and that there's a sustainable way to do it, but that you probably need to learn some new habits and to practice them and get good at them. And this idea that don't try to change everything all at once, just pick a couple areas and go at that consistently for a couple weeks. So maybe start with those power boosts. Start to look at the recommendations I laid out for you, trying to make vegetables half of what you're eating a day, keeping your sugar and your grains contained, and start to see if you notice a difference in how you're feeling. But the piece that I'd also say is what's really important is if you want to change how you eat, you have to ground it in something that really matters to you. And you have to ask yourself, I think, almost like two questions, and we do that as part of the program when people answer some questions when they're signing up. We get them to really think about what's in it for them, like, why are you really doing this? And I guess the two questions I'd ask you, and I say you almost want to do on the back of an envelope for yourself, is what do you have to gain by changing how you eat and eating well for you? And make it really tangible. And then equally important, you have to ask yourself, what do you have to lose if you don't take action? And then think about your vision for, okay, so you've completed the program or you've gotten on your own, your eating working better for you. Who are you? What's possible? What three adjectives would you use to describe you? And I think that these things are really important because modern life is so full of things that you want or should be doing. And you have to figure out a way to prioritize this to the top of that list. And honestly, I think for everybody, it really should be. And the other piece of advice that I'll tell you, too, is that you get really good at this. Does not, in the beginning, like when you're learning anything new, it takes you a little longer to understand stuff, figure it out, make it happen, but then it becomes second nature. And that's the lifestyle approach of the thing. And what's so interesting, Dory, is I actually had forgotten that you were like in my first group. You were in the pilot on its like 8th version. So probably what you even, it's funny.
Yeah.
It's like there's so much.
But I still use a lot of the recipes and things and the condiments that you've turned me on to, the flavoring, the texture, all that stuff. It's really great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. This has been fabulous. So thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. Thanks again, Sue, and have a good month, everybody, and happy 4th of July and all the summer and all of that. So take care.
Take care. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio with Dr. Dorian Mintzer. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show, listen to past episodes, or download our free retirement transition guide, visit revolutionizeyourretirementradio.com.